Hello, everyone. I want to continue our study in the book of John today. So we're going to start in John chapter 2, verse 12, and read about Jesus' cleansing of the temple. So let me go ahead and get started with reading it for you guys. It says, "The Passover of the Jews was at hand, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple he found those who were selling oxen and sheep and pigeons, and the money changers sitting there. And making a whip of cords, he drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and oxen. And he poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. And he told those who sold the pigeons, 'Take these things away. Do not make my father's house a house of trade.' His disciples remembered that it was written, 'Zeal for your house will consume me.' So the Jews said to him, 'What sign do you show for doing these things?' Jesus answered them, 'Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up.' The Jews then said, 'It has taken 46 years to build this temple, and will you raise it up in 3 days?' But he was speaking about the temple of his body. When therefore he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, and they believed the scripture and the word that Jesus had spoken." So in this passage, we get one of the more confusing things that Jesus does in some ways. He goes to the temple and starts overturning things and even gets a whip to chase people out. And so this is a very puzzling act from Jesus. Why is Jesus doing this? We know, or have probably been told, that it's partly because of the corruption. The people at the temple were selling things, and presumably they weren't just selling them at the normal price, but they were actually taking advantage of people, selling things for more than they would have cost if they were able to bring it with them. So it was totally fine, according to the law, to have things for sale at the temple to make it easier for people who are traveling from far away to come to the temple and do their sacrifices. So we sort of assume that there was some corrupt trading, unfair business practices basically going on at the temple. And that's part of why Jesus comes and does this. Another element that's not as present in the story of John, but is present in the other Gospels, is that this is also foreshadowing the future judgment of Jerusalem. In AD 70, the city of Jerusalem ends up getting destroyed not too long after Jesus' life. And Jesus is prophesying that that's going to take place and is enacting that prophecy. But here, what it really focuses on is the fact that Jesus is actually foreshadowing something totally different than just the destruction of the physical temple. He's talking about the destruction of the temple, but it tells us that what he really means is the destruction of his body, and he will raise it up in 3 days. This is actually really significant that Jesus compares his body to the temple, because what the temple is supposed to be is it's supposed to be the place where God dwells on earth. But if we've followed along with the Old Testament, we see that when the second temple was built, the temple that was standing in Jesus' day, there was never a time where God very clearly restored his presence like he was present during the first temple. So when Jesus claims that he will raise the temple up in 3 days, he is basically saying, actually, my body is the place where God is dwelling on earth right now, not the temple. And when you destroy it, because they get upset about what he does and eventually crucify him, when you destroy it, it will actually be raised up in 3 days. There will be a resurrection. And so we see in this seemingly strange act of Jesus, we see a sign of what Jesus is doing. He is providing God's presence to people here on earth. So the questions that really should be raising in our mind at the end of this passage is, what is the meaning of Jesus being the temple? And we can go back and look at the scripture to see, well, what is the significance of the temple? And we can go back and even look at the significance of the tabernacle and see, what does it mean if Jesus really takes on the identity of being the new temple, the new tabernacle, the new place where God is dwelling with people. And so we can take a look at that. Or another thing that we can do is just ask ourselves, if Jesus is fighting against corruption in this way, what does that mean for our lives? And if Jesus is the true way to experience the presence of God, well, then how do I experience more of Jesus in my life? So those are a few things that we can think about in terms of application and in terms of just trying to get a better understanding of who Jesus is from the book of John. Thank you guys, and I'll talk to you guys again tomorrow.